right? So it is April 29th, 2021. The US COVID cases are at 31,976,888. The deaths are at 570,421. Wisconsin cases are at 596,522. Deaths 6,807. Wisconsin, on a lighter note, Wisconsin vaccines are at 34%, and we have a total of 234 million vaccines administered, which is good news.
A lot of progress, but hardly out of the woods.
Definitely. So can you start by just giving your name and if you're comfortable sharing demographic, like age, ethnicity, and gender?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me and for doing this project. My name is Jake Wrasse. I currently work as the Legislative and Community Relations Liaison for the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in the Chancellor's office here. I am 27 and I'm a graduate of UWEC, graduated in 2016. I've been back in Eau Claire since 2018 doing this work, and it has been a really strange and one of those words we're just so sick of is unprecedented. But this was the first global pandemic in a postmodern, highly technologically advanced society that also has a lot of political undercurrents and movements across the world that are changing how many countries are discoursing about politics, and to see how it plays out just at one campus and in one community was an astounding look into human nature and what's possible really when people band together, just as much as it's been a look at how disappointing humans can also be. And it's maybe all the more frustrating because I think we all do those kind of human things where we listen to the stuff that agrees with us and we discount the things that don't. And there are a lot of human tendencies that exacerbate what we felt and what people have gone through. But I feel like it's been a privilege still to be going through it here and be in a place where there are so many folks working together to protect different industries and support all the displaced workers, but not what I expected my early career to involve.
Not what I expected my college career to look like either. So I totally, yeah. What are the primary things that you do on a day-to-day basis? And this can be like just you have an interesting job. It's one of those things you get into college and you're like, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
So like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Your job, extracurricular, stuff like that?
Yeah. So as someone in the Chancellor's office here, we are over the whole university, but also academics is very separate. And systems for promotion and tenure and setting the curriculum and courses all kind of happens through this process that protects everybody's voices. So people think, well, what does the Chancellor's office do if you're not dealing with academics? It's all these different connections. So the university is located in a community. We're a state public university, so we are funded in part by the state government. We're overseen by UW System Board of Regents, which is sort of the authority over this pseudo state agency that is the University of Wisconsin system. And in the community, we are a major employer, one of the top 5 employers in Eau Claire, I believe. And we have 91,000 living alumni across the country. And with all those different connections, there come opportunities to seek new sources of funding for programs or research, or to just ensure that our legislators, local elected officials understand what kind of an impact the university is having, and help connect people with information. The way that we communicate and the way the internet and social media can both help and harm the quality, veracity of information that gets out there is a real challenge. But I think the benefit that universities have, with maybe the exception of this last year, this is a place where people come together to talk to people. And there is so much to be learned from all the great folks who work here. And I've had the benefit of doing that in this job now for about 3 years. And for 3.5 years while I was a student, I was in the student government and just got to know how this big, wonderful, awful, simple, confusing, complex place works, right? It's a kind of sublime thing. And we're really lucky to have it here in the Chippewa Valley. So I'm lucky enough to get to spend time contacting those individuals who have questions, responding to questions, helping us with messaging and public engagement so that even if you're not that tied in with the university, you can know when a good thing happens here. So the average day is about, I tend to say it's about a third writing, a third researching, and a third talking to people. That's just what I wish it was. It's so often like I had this whole plan, but it's 8:30 and that's out the window. But there are all these big long-term projects and goals that we get to pursue too. So it's a great position. It's very humbling because you're learning from people all over the place who are experts in things that you're not close to an expert in. And there's a lot of real emotion. There's real anger, real happiness, joy, sadness. There's a lot of reasons that people reach out. So I get to do a little bit of everything and try to help share the story of how this place works and what's happening here.
So you're like a walking source of information.
Hopefully. I think it's really important to be upfront with people when you don't know something. And so I try to be good at that because I don't think anything quite so disappointing as somebody telling you confidently the wrong information and not following up or pretending to know and not. I like to get back to people and this is a state institution and it's in a heavily regulated public industry, but it's still a university and gets lumped in with what people think of universities across the country. And we've got a different kind of story to tell, and it is fun to get to do that. So hopefully a source of information, but at least someone who's listening. I would hope to be that.
Which is important for universities, especially with COVID and how COVID has impacted higher education, burnout, students being stressed, but also the climate of Wisconsin. Politics with higher education is a whole fun thing. So we're in Eau Claire, so obviously you live in Eau Claire. What's it like? Yeah. What's it like to live here? What would you say? How would you sum that up?
In the pandemic context, or
you could do a before and after, or either or, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Durand, Wisconsin originally, so that's a town of about 2,000 people, about 30 miles from here, and a lot of the things that I think people enjoy about small towns are also things that you can enjoy about living in Eau Claire. It's not a city with a ton of traffic. It's not a city that is all high rises and towers. It's generally a pretty accessible city with a good public transit system. And what's changed a lot since I started as a student here in 2012 is the level of collaboration and partnerships. The university's been a big part of that. And that's one of the reasons I'm proud to work here and was excited to come work here. But it's also renewed a focus on what makes a place special. It's easy to, I think, put things on autopilot. And this city is one that's really intentionally said, what are our greatest assets and are we utilizing them as best we can? So the Pablo Center is a great example of, we have this vibrant arts, cultural, music, food scene, but that's just kind of because that is here. And there are a lot of things that it's like, oh yeah, we just have that. The community in the last 9-10 years has taken big risks and leaps to try and make more. And it feels like a place where people who make a difference and could be doing anything anywhere choose to stay here because you can really make a difference here, but you can also enjoy the kind of quality of life that you'd like to have. You can have a big yard, you can find a house that's affordable, hopefully, although that's a challenge, and also something the community is working on is how can we construct more affordable housing. And that's not to say just low income housing, it's holistic. It shouldn't have to break the bank to live here. And in so many areas, I think we lead the state in terms of quality of life, and just saw a great place to start a small business. So that's kind of what Eau Claire is like. What does it feel like to live in Eau Claire? I feel like you're never that disconnected from nature and sort of, I guess what I'd call maybe spirituality, which I don't have a religious connotation with, but just that connection to something bigger, whether that's forests or rivers or bodies of water, going out bird watching, hunting, snowmobiling. There's so many ways to interface with the natural world here. And one of my favorite things is just picking up volume 1 and reading what the talented creative people who call this place home are up to. So it's a place that I've been able to see it grow and see it realize a lot of its potential. And now I kind of feel like I'm along for the ride, and we're all discovering what completely new ideas, that it's not like growing out of this thing, but there's so much more possible now that we've embraced that identity as a music and arts cultural capital that also provides great shopping and living opportunities and a wide variety of different working opportunities, great distance from the Twin Cities. It's just it's a Goldilocks kind of town in a lot of ways. It's just right. And I think the big credit there is to the people who choose to stay and make things happen instead of moving away. And you don't have to look far to see the positive impact that's had. I think during the pandemic, then it was all the more disappointing that everything that we'd seen grow and grow and grow for 8 years, and all this proof of concept of we can be this kind of community if we partner. The Pablo Center was just in its second year, and it had finished its first year without a deficit. Like it came out in the black. And so to come ahead at all in the first year of operating a public arts center is kind of unheard of. And the restaurants were thriving, and all the different community theater productions, there was just a groundswell. And that was all the stuff we had to stop right away. And I think that's part of what made the community come together. It's like all the stuff we had to stop, and all the people who perform that music, make that food, and make this a special place by putting on these things. I think the community felt strongly that it needed to support those that were being really especially displaced and unable to pay rent. And that kind of supportiveness, I think we looked for ways to show that virtually when we couldn't do it in person the way we would prefer to. And I am involved with a number of different organizations. The one that comes to mind right now, we just had the Eau Claire Jazz Festival for the first time virtually, and fewer bands participating than normal. Many bands and band directors told us that they really didn't have their first day of school where they had all their students in their class until earlier in the month of April. So they didn't have things performance ready. But we kind of anticipated this would be disruptive for everybody. And so there was a virtual community concert that raises money to support not only the operation of the Jazz Festival, which doesn't have to have as high of a registration fee then for these bands, but also supporting the establishment of a jazz scholarship specifically related to this festival. And the tack they took, their executive director and these two great student interns, was to say, we want to provide value, and that's value to the community, value to future UW Eau Claire students, and value to current students. So they made is more than 25 master classes that they recorded in Pablo Center or different spaces in Haas Fine Arts, and captured part of a performance and captured this really intimate give and take between the performer and the clinician. And some of the folks that we come in have played with the biggest names in contemporary music. So whether you're looking at the last 50 years, or there's always people who are really, really active and just beginning. So they found a way to capture that creativity and say, we get that you couldn't come perform or get adjudicated at the festival this year, but here's something you can do for 40 minutes in your next class, and you'll get some of what that was like. I'm proud to see that I think a lot of organizations have had to focus in on what is the root of the value we provide, what's the impact we want to have, and they found a way to do that despite the huge and perspective altering disruption that was the pandemic. So I think Eau Claire will continue to be that kind of a place where people gather and collaborate and celebrate year round. But it was especially bittersweet after so many years of seeing this identity grow and be validated by people the world over who were like, yeah, you've got a really cool thing going here. To see all that stop so suddenly was, yeah, just hard to imagine. And still, I think we'll all be unpacking it for a long time.
It's a true hidden gem. When I chose to come to school here, my parents, just from around the Twin Cities, none of us had ever been to Eau Claire, and I remember my dad being shocked and just being like, this is just like a neat little, like, this is such a neat place. And you're right with the nature thing. I can never go too far away from a river or a lake,
yeah,
or in anything. And is truly a special thing. And it is heartbreaking to see how the pandemic like altered it. So when the pandemic first was a thing, when did it first enter your radar?
I really like that kind of idea of like resiliency and how can things come back. And I was just thinking about that as you asked that question. I think, well, let me start by establishing that I think I read more news than most people my age. Every morning, there's a website that co-locates a bunch of press releases from across Wisconsin that covers the state capitol. So I read that. And the Leader Telegram, the TV 13 website, TV 18 website, Volume 1 less frequently because I don't always publish every day. Then statewide Wisconsin Public Radio, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and then Madison.com, which has the State Journal, the Cap Times, and the third one I always forget. Nationally, I look at Associated Press, Politico, New York Times, and Washington Post. And I can remember that just because that's the exact order of the bookmarks. And that's if I am looking to know what's going on, that's the kind of order of operations I go through. And in college, I was on the speech team, the competitive forensics team, and it's a very historically successful team, and I had great experiences there. And one of the events was extemporaneous speaking, where you're covering, you get a question and you get half an hour to put together a response based on current news. And so I recall the scare over things like Ebola and the Zika virus. And these are all things I learned a fair amount about, talked about, and coached or even judged in speech. And so I think it was December where this, hey, there's a thing happening in China, kind of first came up. And the initial reports seem to have understated what was going on. And so I think as we continue to see those, it's like, no, that's really bad, but there are outbreaks and they are quashed all the time. And we generally know how to collaborate with these areas. I believe President Trump in 2018 disbanded the pandemic response team. And the quote was something to the effect of, why would I keep paying all you if I don't need you right now? If I need you, I'll hire you. And
what poor timing.
I mean, we as a country were able to take for granted the security and safety in many different senses that we have as people living in this country, which isn't to say it's perfect, but it's like part of the reason this all was so shocking is that how could this even happen? And when it became clear that this was something that was spreading, and you started to see, I think, Italy and Europe In February, were really becoming these scary epicenters, and at the same time, we're starting to see news and understanding it's spreading, and yet we don't have much communication in the aftermath, it turns out, between the United States and China, and you don't have a great concept of who's working on figuring out what this thing is. And so the last like normal event I think I went to before the pandemic was Research in the Rotunda, which is an annual UW system event. All the campuses come and students present their research posters and projects to elected officials. And that's the first event I was at where there was hand sanitizer everywhere, and people were like, "Hey, try to normalize the elbow bump instead of a handshake." And even on the precipice of everything shutting down, it wasn't evident what this was going to mean. And I think that Research in the Rotunda Day was right around my birthday. So then we went out for dinner one of those next nights, and then nothing for a year.
So you got your birthday in right before your last birthday.
Yeah, yeah, it's really right under the wire. And I think there are so many things that you read in the news like that. A thing is happening. It's like, okay, let us know if it keeps happening. For it to continue happening, and then in hindsight have turned out to be so understated that we were just completely walloped, caught off our feet, and we didn't have not just, I mean, scientists have been extremely collaborative during this period, but we didn't have the federal government bringing to bear all the resources of the Centers for Disease Control and the State Department to collaborate with the Chinese government and start learning about this. It's really scary in hindsight how we walked right into something that we were totally unprepared for. So that's a long and disorganized answer to your question. When did I start hearing about it? But it was something I was kind of aware of. And the moment I'll never forget, I guess, when it became real and that we just kind of had to accept that we had no idea what this was going to be, is we were in a meeting where there was about to be an event where a bunch of students were going to be in Schofield Auditorium in this building here. And we're like, we do this all the time. And I had to say, guys, the WHO just declared a global pandemic. It doesn't matter if we do this all the time. We've not done this before. And it's possible that was like the last right thing I knew about the pandemic, was just to accept that this is, we don't know what kind of a ride this is going to be. So we all went, and it ended up being 100 days that I was working remotely before I was able to start coming back to campus part of the time. And there's such a capacity for collaboration and communication in this community. And it was really something to see how people didn't give up when this impossible, unanticipated thing that we could not have dreamed to prepare for. It didn't stop this place. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, are your thoughts about the pandemic still kind of like, not so much like, well, we're not gonna know when it's gonna end, what's gonna happen. We just day by day have to make sure, masked, 6 feet. Are you still kind of like taking it as it comes, or do you have your thoughts changed?
Yeah, well, so it's the end of April of 2021, and we really need the summer to be good, is what it feels like. Just humanity writ large, students on the campus, the faculty, staff on the campus, my family, the people I know. It's just we need some normalcy, and it seems like the summer weather just allowing people to not be cooped up inside, sharing the same air. Hopefully, we get at least that buffer. It's concerning to see that vaccination rates aren't higher. It's understandable that people are put off by various developments that give them pause, but you mentioned before the internet, and a lot of the concerns being amplified about the vaccines are just unfounded myths. And I do have that worry, trying to anticipate like what might we need to be getting ready for. we haven't had to re-examine like what happens if there's a new variant and it's homegrown in the US and we get back to fall and we kind of have to go back into another kind of shutdown. And I think the difference I'm feeling now is I'm willing to suspend that concern because I also need a bit of a summer and a bit of a break. And
breather.
It's just well, when I think about this, it usually just comes back to the nature of humanity. We forget that we're animals. We forget that the main thing we know is that eventually we pass on, and in the meantime, we have to stay alive. And so society over hundreds of thousands of years kind of developed from hunter-gatherers to where we find ourselves now. And the same impulses that served us well when we were, not exempted from the food chain are still very much at play. So remembering what makes us feel good. So remembering where you had food, remembering a positive experience, those are things your body notes on a level we don't really clock. Things that made you afraid, places that you associate with uncertainty. Like there's a lot of intuitive and unconscious work happening in our minds that stems from an era where we don't just have things ringing in our face all the time. And I'm sitting in front of, there's like 5 screens I can count and 1 light. And our brains, our prefrontal cortex does an okay job with that, but our ancient brains are really not all that different. And people just abhor uncertainty because it's a reminder that all of our best laid plans, all the things that we think we can count on and make assumptions based off of, are actually themselves uncertain and constructed in the way we talk to each other and the way we think about things. So it's such a natural thing for people to respond in ways that make absolutely no sense when something that upends everything they thought they knew comes to town. And that's the first thing in the US was like, everybody bought toilet paper. It's like, is that really helping? Did you need it? Well, kept other people from getting it. Maybe you needed it. An emotional reaction to that makes sense. An emotional reaction to, I need to think about whether or not I give my child a vaccination. That makes sense that we feel that way. At the same time, the science is very different. And this happened in an era of, sort of rhetorical polarization politically, where the kind of American ideal of tolerance as a foundational piece of how you can have a multi-ethnic, non-religiously aligned democracy required tolerance. And that's because, again, the way humans and human society evolved began with shortcuts. So your brain is really good at like picking out, like if you just look at an acoustic tile on a ceiling or something, you can find things that look like faces. Your eyes are drawn to this. That's because your body is super ready for you to be spontaneously attacked by a tiger and have you running away before you're aware of it. That kind of reflex is not super helpful when you're trying to just calmly take in information. And so a lot of these biases, stereotypes stem from the brain's affinity for shortcuts, because we can't consciously be thinking about every single thing we do every day because we don't have the mental capacity. So we make it easier for ourselves. One way to make people feel connected to a cause, a candidate, an idea, is to focus on differences. And that was the era in which this pandemic happened. And instead of the group identity being the shared values we have, it became, do you appear to be a part of this in-group, whatever group you were camped in? And if you're not a part of it, then you're necessarily the other. You're a part of what's bad, what's wrong. This very binary thinking was already typifying some of our political trends. And when you add to that, all bets are off, everything you thought you knew is not necessarily relevant right now. It was difficult for many people, I think, to consider the possibility that they had to unlearn some of these things, or that they had to accept some level of wrongness, or just like, oh, maybe I was a bit of a hard line on this thing. We've just got to buckle together and get through this. Some people self-persuaded in that direction. Some people self-persuade just the opposite way. They stick in harder. It's like, oh, everything's wrong. The one thing I know for sure is I'm a part of this group. The pandemic and humanity simultaneously showcase the best and the worst of what we have to offer. It's the frontline workers, the healthcare personnel, the nurses who are going through this unimaginable emotional labor of watching so many patients die. And at the same time, there were people who were not doing things that were quite as productive. It's just such a human thing. And I think it draws some attention to what leadership and communication can do for helping a large group of people accept a direction. And that's kind of, politics is, to a certain extent, the authoritarian allocation of values. It's like, here is the one box in which it is legitimate for government to impose its authority, and we need to argue about what things are beneficial to us. And if that's the way that we're moving things forward, we're trying to collaborate and talk, these differences and these biases that we bring to all of our interactions, usually without noticing them, can undermine a lot of that potential. But it's such a human thing. So I'm accepting that I have the human need to relax, and even if there's more changes coming or more promotion that needs to be done, or any of that, there's a need for self-acceptance and acceptance of others, and then also there's just, we continue dealing with this. Humans have a remarkable capacity for change, and a remarkable capacity to forget pain. So I think we've changed a lot, we've evolved, we're working, we'll keep doing that. But pain goes away pretty quick, actually. Trauma remains, but pain is like, as soon as we're free of that, we start kind of acting out again. There's a huge explosion of the second wave of cases in India happening right now.
Yeah.
And some of that was the false confidence, or the letting go of some of that caution for the need to express ourselves as humans. And what Eau Claire is going for it is that we have a scene that celebrates humanity. Whatever you are excited by, you can find other people excited by it and gathering to participate in those kind of activities. So that'll be really important to nurture people as they come back.
Especially working on a college campus, all the students are like, let me out of the house. I need to, I can say my whole house, I believe all of my roommates are, at least 3 of us are fully vaccinated. Someone gets their second shot today, and then the other gets their second shot on Saturday. And we're awesome. All just looking forward to that summer. Like, our families are vaccinated, we're vaccinated. There's a little room to kind of exhale.
Yeah.
And India's the second wave, and I saw a news article that we talked about in class where there's like crematoriums on the street. And you see that, and it puts it into perspective, but then we're looking forward to being able to seeing your friends and family outside. Perhaps this is a thing in social media where people are talking about the first quarantine and like late March, April/May last year, where everyone was home. Anyone that wasn't a frontline worker was at home. How did you cope with that? Like, what did you do? Did you take up a new hobby? Did you go insane, scream? How'd you cope with that?
Well, I'm really glad to hear the vaccinations are coming through for you all, and it's great that you're getting them. And India reminds us, in the lack of another news thing I listen to is the BBC World Service daily podcast, and they are just out of pure oxygen. So it's our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen. So it's, how can they be out of oxygen? Well, it needs to be all oxygen. And so how do we build these oxygen concentration centers next to hospitals? And I think it just reiterates that we need to be aware of the possibility of a threat that is not immediate. Just because we aren't facing it eye to eye right now doesn't mean we're not going to. And the vaccine technology itself, the messenger ribonucleic acid mRNA technology that kind of unlocked this vaccine, was something that started decades ago and didn't have a clear application. There was a really long opinion analysis piece in the New York Times the other day that was just, how has the human race's lifespan, average lifespan, doubled in the last century? And it pointed out that Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin, left a petri dish out over the weekend and came back and was like, oh, that's gross. Wait a minute, this is killing the cells of the sample that's in here. You can't only fund science that you think has a clear application, because the thing that is allowing us to go back to any kind of normal didn't start that way. Microwave ovens, that was equipment in the nose cone of an airplane, and a guy walked past it with a chocolate bar in his pocket and it melted. It's like, oh, that's not what we expected. So I think that thinking about the pandemic response team and the other kind of constant vigilance and acknowledgement that we can't just be distracted by the shiny, there are these long-term important goals that we have to be focused on, I think is an outcome I hope folks remember, because a digital society and everything refreshes every time you pull down on a screen. Life's not moving that fast, and some things do endure, and there are real impacts regardless of whether or not you'd like to believe it's true or if it's comfortable. And it's important to support all the people who are working on that day in and day out, whether or not it's needed in an emergency or if we know there's an emergency coming for it. Now, for me, the start of the pandemic probably didn't impact me as much as many other folks. I'm an introvert. I know I've been talking for 40 minutes. I'm an introvert, and
you were training your whole life to just be told to sit inside.
It wasn't a shocking contrast. The biggest thing, though, the best part of my work is getting to go out and see people. So I'm professionally extroverted, and for that to go away was a little challenging. But at the same time, that period of, I'd say, March through at least October is probably the busiest I've ever been. I was working from home for part of that time, but there was just so much to do. I didn't really feel like I had stepped away from work probably until summer came. And it's like, oh, this is when the semester is not happening, and there would be more opportunities to go out and reconnect with people who we have ongoing partnerships with, and just hear what else is important to folks in Eau Claire. So I think it became more real after the semester ended. And part of the reason for that is that my fiance and I actually moved.
Oh yeah.
Our lease ended at the end of April, and beginning May 1st, we moved into our new place. And I think something I'll always remember about the pandemic, we were taking walks every day and getting out of the house and in our little neighborhood. And we were at, I remember being at the local Quick Trip late April, early May. And I saw a guy wearing a mask. And that was the first one. Now, and to her credit, my fiance had been grocery shopping. So I'd not been at places with a ton of people, but I remember seeing the first one and thinking, okay, I guess that's the thing you can do. We just had no idea how it was spreading, how it would continue to spread, that total disorientation. So we're moving out of this building where we're on a 3rd floor and needing to use a shared elevator. We're not wearing masks. People came in and out of the elevator, but I had Lysol wipes and I was wiping the buttons. And it's like, doing what you can, because that was all I could do to stay safe. And in hindsight, it turns out that wasn't even keeping us safe. So it was such a weird, totally human thing to do in the middle of an extremely busy period. We just took that week and we were packing and moving and transferring stuff, and renting a truck and hearing how different everything for the people that worked at the truck rental facility, where it's like, yeah, we would give you furniture pads, but we're all out of them and we're not allowed to let you reuse them if somebody else has had them. And then we moved into this new place and we didn't, see our realtor or the property manager or anything. It was just also, devoid of human interaction and full of fear and uncertainty. And that was just a very, very privileged that I was able to continue my work, that it is something that can be done remotely. So if I'm in the state capitol or in a car, or I should be able to be connected to my work. And I was able to keep doing that, but it really, in hindsight, stands out how that move was an epitome of our early uncertainty and fear. And I think there were positives that came out of it. After graduate school, I've not been very good at reading. I feel like reading is work, and I read for work. And getting even just into audiobooks, like, so make going for a walk part of your day, and just that intellectual curiosity sparked. And there was like just taking in new information, even if you didn't hear every word, is worth it. And that's getting to that kind of spirituality idea, connecting to a bigger unknown, is great. And it was also a chance just to spend a lot of time with my fiance, who was actually going to be going to graduate school in England. And then a pandemic happened, and
Wow.
she found an online program, and it would have been awesome for her to get to go to England. She really wanted to. I'm not mad that she's here. That did work out really well.
What a time to move. I remember the search and screen in May, and you were like, I'm sorry,
right.
there are boxes everywhere. We're in a new place.
Yeah.
So your work didn't stop. So you maybe, I remember my mother couldn't go to work. And so she just like did puzzles and watched a bunch of TV, and we had to ration our Instacart grocery store meals. So you maybe had a little bit of a more weaning into it, rather than a no more work, sit at home, do nothing. Which is
it was
nice.
kind of a slow burn. Yeah.
Which is kind of nice. Moving though, that so you moved places and you were still working. Your relationships with your coworkers, you said, was very different because you're going out and talking to people. How did COVID change your relationship with your friends and family?
I've never been good at remembering to text and call. I have ADD, the inattentive kind, which is I think not what people stereotypically consider ADD to look like. I spend time on the things I'm really interested in, and if you ask me to do a math equation, I'm going to walk away from you. And so it's but texts and notifications and things that pop up and blip are like, my brain is already bouncing around, so I don't need more distractions. And I think I noticed how easy I'd made it for myself to not even think about, should I call somebody? And even as a pretty, solid introvert, I remembered that because I also wasn't getting it in my job, and that I always felt better on the days where I got to go out and connect with somebody, that finding a way to build that in where it wasn't something I avoided was really important. So I think there are plenty of people that I've talked to more. I don't know if I've frozen on your screen. I just froze on, looks like my video froze here.
Yeah, you're frozen on my screen as well.
Okay, let's see if we can restart that.
See, the joys of Zoom. always
right.
never
And
present.
this is normal now. And yeah, so that whole period of like, oh, it seems like people are doing things on Zoom. I that all was like new information, and I just went back to phone calls. And that's been really nice. I'm lucky that my parents both live close to here, and so I'm able to visit their various backyards and do things like that. The biggest change is, so my fiance and I got engaged February 11th of 2020.
Again, right?
Month later, my birthday is March 10th, so I think March 11th, I think, was that dinner. March 13th, last person out, turn the lights off because we're working from home. Getting to spend that much time with my partner is such a gift, and also a really challenging thing. And it's not been good for everybody, I think, to be cooped up with whoever their family, whatever living situation they're in. I'm very, very lucky that way. So it's been I think, a communication challenge. We're both good communicators. We met on the speech team, and I think we're pretty empathetic and try to get where each other's coming from. She's an extrovert, so she was missing it a lot more, and she worked in retail, and so the job just stopped. And it took 9 weeks for the first unemployment check to arrive. So she had a very different experience. She also recognized that, like, so I get done with work and walk out in the living room, I'm still getting home from work, and there's like, my brain is trying to wind down and come back to, okay, you can just let all that go. What's tonight about? And she'd be ready to talk and get into it. So it's like, what does taking some introvert time look like when you're confined to the same X amount of square feet? I think it's made us stronger and made us remember, like, it's work. You don't ever reach a point, I don't think, of communication where it's like, we've got it set, we don't have to try at all. There's always a need to check in and take stock of things. And I got to do that with a lot of different friends and family over this.
The introvert thing rings very true. My family is half introverted, half very extroverted.
Yeah.
And my dad was working in our unfinished basement on an old ping pong table. And he was like, I'm going to go insane, because it was the only place he could be alone. Because how do you get confined to that one space? And how do you map out your house? So, like, if I'm sitting in this chair, it means I don't want to talk. But if I'm sitting in this chair, it means I'm like ready to go. Like, it,
right. Those non-verbal signals. And I think one positive that may come from this is just more empathy between introverts and extroverts, because I think we all experienced whatever the opposite was, and we're like, oh, you really want to get back out there, you're really missing that. And extroverts said to me, like, it was that big of a mental burden for you to think about going out for dinner after work? And I'm like, yeah, it's not your fault, that's just, it's kind of, but I don't know how much awareness there was of that. And it's typically said, I think, that it's an extroverted society that we live in, or is built more for extroverts and morning people. And as an introverted night owl, it's like, yeah, that contrast had kind of been clear to me. But I hope we all understand each other's needs a little bit better coming out of this.
There's a fear for the future of, I know particularly with students, I've been online or half online or like sort of in person for 3 semesters. How am I going to go back to being around other people? How do introverts go back to work and like rewire their brain? And there is that level of communication of like, I need to go sit in my room and just like put my head down, or I am really in need of some social interaction. Especially, I know college students, our roommates are the only people we see. It's almost lucky that I live with 4 other people, because that's 4 other people that I get to see every day. So when these are kind of lifted, this is another one of my things that I like to ask people. What's like the first couple things that you're gonna do or that you've really been missing that you're excited for it to be a thing again?
I really love water, and
What a
I'm a
great
Pisces.
place to live
So
for that.
if you're keeping track, I'm a Pisces, and maybe that's why. But like, so I had a river out my window in the one place we lived, and then we moved, and I don't have that. It's like I've so enjoyed taking hikes and walks that are about finding a spot to hang out. And when that happens, it's like it's crazy how big of a difference that makes. Because I'll definitely fall into the trap of work, eat, relax, sleep, and it's like you've been inside for 2 days, and your your level of anxiety has got to be correlated in some way to the fact you haven't heard a bird or wind or anything. It's like your perception of this hyper controlled environment is just not reality or the world. And I think water and the ecosystems that surround water really remind me and put things in perspective. So it was 3 days ago now. I was walking to campus across the footbridge, and I saw for the first time of the season some suckerfish sunning themselves in the shallows. And like walking across that bridge in the summer is the most beautiful nature. I mean, it's just such a, it's almost unearthly, but it's like also the epitome of Earth. It's a gorgeous place. I'd like to see more of the Great Lakes or an ocean, or I think just pursuing those little things that I've tried to keep in my life, like the go find a pond. I think so. If that's a lake vacation or it's just appreciating more and different kinds of nature, I think is going to be important, because with winter there is a limit to how much you can enjoy outdoor stuff in winter, and I'm a winter fan. But it did limit, and it did confine folks inside in a way that made it, yeah, all the more dangerous to try and see friends. And so we're planning a party. It's a wedding, and so that'll be coming in the near future. We're very excited to see people then. And I think reconnecting with people in those spaces where we just have nothing to do but be ourselves and kind of rediscover who we are in relation to each other. And I think that's going to be really satisfying and necessary and good. But it's a lot of the folks I talk to are like just getting to their point of immunity, or are also in academia and are just like, this, I'll see you after the semester. But like and I think there's a recognition of some of those emotional and physical needs there. It's like, yes, it's weird, and yes, we can see people again, but I can't right now. And I hope people maintain those boundaries as we transition back to transition back to normal, or just, evolve forward into whatever reality looks like. Continuing to take care of each other's emotional and needs for rest and breaks and all of that, I think is going to be good. So as an introvert, I'm battling it will be nice to see people again with, here's a list of 60 people that you should, which is bad, that you should be talking to. You should catch up with all these people. Well, it's a list of 60. I can't do all these, so I'm not going to do any of them. I hope we're not too all or nothing, and I hope people show themselves grace and kindness as they try to navigate this. There's not going to be a perfect way to come back together, and we'll see ups and downs and setbacks potentially. But if we are more aware of our own humanity, I hope we can be more aware of others too. And so humans and nature is which is just kind of a back to basics, I guess, is what I'm looking forward to. Live music is the other big one. That was like shows at Pablo Center, outdoor concerts, which is another like uniquely human, like you're sharing that experience of this music that these people made together at this one time once, and you felt it. And there's a lot of intangibles in that kind of connection where you're also just part of a crowd. I wouldn't mind being part of a crowd again. I think that might be a bit.
Uh, the introverts that I'm related to all really like being in crowds because it's a way to be around people but not have to talk to anyone. And it's kind of like the best way to be an introvert. So some of my family is just waiting to like go take a lap around the Mall of America just to be like
Oh, right. Yeah.
feel the energy. And I totally get it. When people talk about what they miss, it's usually live music or traveling. I just can't wait to like not feel guilty about seeing people or to go outside or to take a
Yeah.
small trip. It's not always that grandiose thing. Sometimes it's that really small thing that you did every day that brought you a little bit of joy, and now you just can't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So you mentioned Mall of America. My brother is a merchandising manager at one of the stores there. He works somewhere else now, but as it hit, and then as they reopened, and uh, there was just no joy in it. And I feel blessed to have been connected with people who had such a very different experience than me. Because also a very human thing to whatever I experienced is what everybody experienced. And if they didn't, it's their fault. And it's like this is just ruined and canceled everybody's plans. And I think I don't think there's an easy point in life to have gone through this. Like, I don't know if there's one group that really made out just really great, because even like babies, that's socialization, and that's I think everybody's missed and lost something. I think it's especially painful when you're on the cusp or a transition of something. So college students, high school students, there are so many different rude awakenings, I think, that those groups have had to have, in addition to the disruption of all this, because it's not just the world has changed, it's also a lot of the assumptions you made about the steps of how your life progresses and how you're planning your life. All those variables have to be re-examined, and you didn't get to see people and discover things accidentally. And the contrast between a regular year and the last year is just heartbreaking, because I know how much those years meant to me. And yeah, I don't know that there's a good time, but I think there are a few groups that have really experienced such a disorienting contrast. I'd say college students are very, very high on the list. If not, I guess
I just celebrated my second pandemic birthday as
did you?
well. Yeah, as well as I'm finishing up my third COVID semester. Um, it is I got three. I'm halfway. Like, I've had 6 semesters of college. Half of them were pandemic and half of them were not. And it is odd to have I feel like I lost something, but I don't know what I lost because I didn't. Being a first semester sophomore, you're just starting to kind of figure it out. And like,
Yeah.
you grow so much. I'm a completely different person. I was 19 and now I'm 21. And it's a massive jump. I started the pandemic at 19 and now I'm 21. It's just the feeling of having lost something that you don't even know what you lost, but you know you lost something. It's weird, but I've had several people in my life that someone canceled a wedding, someone still had their wedding, people have lost people and not been able to have that celebration of life. High school, I feel really bad for high schoolers because there are only so many good things that you get in high school. I was a speech kid in high school. Had I lost that would have been gut-wrenching. I think more so than some of the things I've lost in college.
That's a really good point. I really feel that too. And again, that empathy is so important, because people are experiencing this all over. And if you're a student and if you're not around a group of adults, or if there's not somebody who's taking a higher level view and saying, okay, we need to live through this and not just explain it away in the simplest way possible. Like, I think there's going to be a big difference in what those formative experiences look like. We all have so little control, though. We think we do. We look for things that are more certain than others and try to keep those constants. I think people will find their way through, and I hope people will find the help they need to process whatever they've experienced. But it was just a year of kind of endless heartbreak. And right at the beginning, actually, I wrote an essay that did end up in volume 1. And one of the things I think I wrote was just like, as we're all mourning the loss of the year we thought we'd have. It's like, so you talk about losing that experience. It's like, I don't know what exactly I lost, but there was so much loss associated with having to let go of some of these ideas. And the thing I loved about the place I moved out of was the view out the window, which was my first work from home office, had a river. And watching that through the seasons, watching all this tall grass get just demolished by huge amounts of snow and then come back. Humans can forget pain quickly. I think there will be parts of coming back together that really surprise us how instantly we forget things. And I think there will be things like, there was a meme early on where it's like 50 years from now, Dad, or Grandpa, why is Grandma cleaning the bottle of Clorox wipes with a Clorox wipe? And it's like, there'll be really long stuff. And I think some of it is, again, that hundreds of thousands of years of being this hyper-social species. I think people in general are more resilient than they give themselves credit for, but that's because we're thinking, oh, there are all these constants and I'm just doing the bare minimum. No, nothing's really guaranteed, and you're making things happen if they're happening. So I usually surprise myself by like, oh, it sounds like you're an optimist, which is not always how I feel about things, but it's that fundamental human energy. A long time ago, I realized things don't just work out for the better. The better explanation is that people don't stop trying to improve their circumstances until they've reached a point where they're satisfied. So everybody is as busy as they want to be. That's what busy means. And everybody is, right? So that energy, whether or not you think humans are doing the right things or the wrong things or whatever group you're focused on, I think humans are going to continue being humans. All the good and all the bad that entails. But I do think it means that we will be finding ways to thrive as we emerge from this. And that's what you have to focus on. You choose what energy you're letting into your life and how you're making your decisions. And I think there's plenty to look forward to. But we don't want to keep fooling ourselves into, oh, it's back to normal. It's done now. Because we're seeing in India that can really have colossal negative effects. But very lucky to be in the part of the world that I am, and with the support system I have, the job I have, and it's been so much harder for so many more people. And I think also finding how we can help people we don't know will be a important way to reconnect after this too, because there's those individual things, but just, am I helping generally? Knowing that there's just this infinite number of experiences and nuances that people went through. So I look forward to getting reacquainted with all of us.
Well, that's a pretty poignant place, I think, to leave it. I feel like you pretty much covered all my questions. And
did you ask more than one question, or I didn't just monologue?
No, I definitely asked a few, more just guiding then.
Yeah.
But I hope for a future in which especially Student Senate can go back to meeting in person with you all. Like, that's been a certain vacuum that's been really hard. And I hope congratulations on your wedding. I hope that goes well.
Thank you.
And minimum stress and COVID stress, that's its own thing. And the Clorox, something I think about at least once a week, is you talk about people that grew up in the Great Depression and they're very like thrifty, and there's a certain attribute for growing up in and I'm like, our generation is just always going to get a little too excited by fully stocked Lysol wipes. Like, it's just always going to be like,
yeah. there's a lot of really excellent observations that I think the internet and being disconnected in person made us more open to noticing some of those fundamental things. And some of them are funny like that. Some of them, we were all inside when George Floyd died. And I think that helped. I think that made us better because there was no avoiding it. There was no avoiding it. And I hope we can take the good of that, and also just the chance conversations, the things you can't possibly plan, will spark a lot of creativity. And we're just, yeah, if I have to schedule every Zoom meeting, every time I talk to somebody, it's like, okay, if I don't schedule it, it's not going to happen. Running into people is going to be really cool. Possibly as we're buying Lysol at the grocery store.
I stand by it. I'm gonna be 50 and see like a value pack of Clorox, and I'm gonna buy it. Like, it's just always gonna be like, there's gonna be like an arsenal of Clorox wipes wherever
Never
I
again.
am.
Never caught without it again.
No, never caught without that. Hand sanitizer, like toilet paper.
I guess, yeah, that would be the other big one to stockpile.
And like good toilet paper, not like the see-through. Yeah, you get it.
Oh yeah, you right, priorities, right? Now we know.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciated it.
Thank you for listening, and I think this is a really great project to archive these experiences. And I'm always glad that there are, when we're just trying to get through the moment, that there are people noticing, no, we need to collect this and recognize it. And even though this is such a departure from what we all thought this last year could have been, it is still the last year we had, and that's valuable. I hope we learned from this, and I appreciated the chance to chat with you today.
Well, thank you so much. I will let you get on with your rest of your scheduled Zoom calls.
Oh yeah, back to fun. Thanks so much.